Good afternoon, Packers fans. Aaron Nagler here with your Packers Daily Chat, coming to you live on the Cheesehead TV social channels. Hope you're all doing well. It is Tuesday. Oh, my goodness. And there is an echo in here. Oh, my goodness. Hold on a second. Let me fix this before I go on. That's good stuff. Oh, my gosh. Okay. We'll try that again. Oh my gosh. Because that's not going to work. There we go. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry for the technical snafu there. Hope you can all still hear me. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2. There we go. Okay. Hey, you take a few days away from the studio and everything's different. But hopefully everyone's hanging in there. Can't thank you guys enough for sticking with me through that. Talking about Joe Barry today, as the title indicates, and a lack of consistency, much like here at the Cheesehead TV podcast studio. There's little doubt when you look at Joe and his body of work. We came out of last season, the end of last season, that game against the 49ers in the playoffs, expecting a unit that maybe wouldn't pick up right where they left off, but you did think getting Jair back in the fold as a starter, you've re-signed Rasul Douglas and Devondre Campbell. You thought you'd at least hit the ground running. And, of course, they did anything but there in Minnesota. And it took them a very long time to find their stride. Now, you can look at games of recent vintage if you want to look at the Minnesota game or even the Detroit game, where I know there are frustrations in the second half where Detroit takes the lead. But for the most part, that defense played well enough to win that game, much like they did in Detroit against an offense that moved the ball up and down the field against the rest of the league for the majority of the season. Joe has put together some really good game plans. I think Packers fans either forget that conveniently or they are so overwhelmed with frustration because of certain situational calls. Obviously, I'm a big victim and proponent when things are playing soft coverage and third and short. I know I've gone on my tirades and it's frustrating in the moment. But if you go back and you pull back and you take a 30,000-foot view, you can see there are stretches, even game to game, much less in game, where you can see Joe has a solid foundation. And there are certainly the players in place to be a much more consistent unit. And that, to me, is something that it got talked about a lot, I think, during the beginning of the season. It didn't get spoken about a lot towards the end of the year as the defense kind of made their transition out of the bye week and played a lot better, played a bit of a different style, a lot more zone, a lot more eyes on the quarterback. But I think that conversation kind of got lost in regards to the players that they did bring back into the fold, whether it's Devondre Campbell, whether it was Rasul Douglas, or whether it was guys that you saw play at a pretty damn high level last year, and you expected to continue at least at that level of play, if not to take another step. Clearly talking about Eric Stokes there, but even guys like Darnell Savage, you thought, okay, there's youth there, a mix of experience. We're going to continue to grow. And there was precious little evidence of growth early in the season. If anything, there was ample evidence of regression, both in the young and the older guys. So for my money, when you talk about Joe Barry coming back, which clearly he is, I think consistency is the watchword. Consistency is the number one thing that Matt and company have got to make sure, whatever their style they're going to play, whatever adjustments they're going to make, whatever they're going to do in regards to the back end and the corners and what they're being asked to do, however that shakes out, you have got to find a way to get more consistent performances across the board from all of your guys, but especially the guys who let you down this past season. I'm not telling tales out of school when I say Devondre Campbell did not play up to the level of expectation when they re-signed him coming off an all-pro season, at least for the first half of the season. I think he played better as the year went on. I think he started to turn it around in the Washington game. But when you re-sign a guy coming off an all-pro year to the contract that they did, you certainly expect him to hit the ground running in week one. And I don't think that was the case. Rasul's the same kind of thing, although I give there's context there because of playing in the slot, and obviously they signed him off of a season where he was playing almost exclusively on the perimeter. So there's a change there. Darnell Savage taking a monster step back. These are things that have got to be sorted out and or rectified. And these guys have got to play more consistently week in and week out. And I don't even think it's a question of they've got to play above expectation or they have to improve, although that would be great. I would love it. But they have got to figure out a way to be more consistent, not even week to week, but down to down. Play after play. Sorry, guys. Drive after drive through the entirety of a game, the entirety of a season. Consistency for me is way more than anything else, whatever they add in the draft, whoever they may pick up in free agency, though I don't think they're going to be big spenders. They have got to figure out a way to be more consistent. And maybe that is paring down the playbook a little bit. Maybe that is simplifying things as far as calls at the line of scrimmage, what they're being asked to do, the rules as far as, okay, if then that, like if this guy goes in motion, then I've got to do this. Maybe all of that has to be simplified. I don't know the answer, but I do know consistency is going to be the key if Joe Barry is going to improve upon his first 2 seasons as a coordinator. Because right now, the only consistency is the inconsistency. I know, truly original. Good to see everybody in the comment section. Thanks so much for checking it out. Abdul, thanks to the super chat. Appreciate it, man. Hey, Aaron, if D starts slow again, does Barry last the season? I suspect yes, only because of Matt's, very obvious desire to stick with guys that he believes in, and he clearly believes in Joe. And we've seen it bite the Packers before, whether it's Mo Drayton or whether it's Amari Rodgers, but I just don't think Matt's going to have a quick trigger finger. I mean, I say all that, but who knows? Lord, thanks for the super chat. Packers Daily, searching for UFOs. Yeah, Rodgers was on one on McAfee today. Holy cow. Good stuff. Juan, thanks for the super sticker. Appreciate it, man. Smalls, thanks to the super chat. Wish Brian would channel Thompson and makes 12's decision for him. Yeah, it was interesting. The whole reason I tuned in to McAfee today was to see if Rodgers would have some kind of response and or attempt to counter what the Packers clearly had put out there on Sunday regarding the ball essentially being in his court. But it sure seems like there was no need to do that because Rodgers knows the ball is in his court. As for, Brian and Thompson, if Brian was going to go full Ted, he would have done it last offseason. But re-signing Rodgers to the contract that he did suggests that, he wanted Aaron for the foreseeable future. Now, that said, the way the contract is structured sure makes it a year-to-year proposition and certainly suggests that getting out this year is the only option you can see as far as if you want to get out of the Aaron Rodgers business without it getting worse and worse every offseason in regards to the amount of cap that you're going to be eating if and when he calls it quits. It only gets worse every year after this. So, yeah, we'll see how it transpires. But if Brian was going to pull that, if he was going to pull a Ted, so to speak, it would have been last offseason. I think we can be contenders next year. Just a couple of holes to fill: safety, defensive line, and guard. Hoping we can re-sign Lazard and Big Dog. Chip, I'd be shocked if Lazard is back. Not because I don't think the Packers could use him. I think he's a valuable piece, but he went and played his 1 year here on that deal that has him seeing unrestricted free agency this offseason. You got to think this is probably his one chance to hit the open market, coming off a productive year. Probably not the year he was hoping he'd have numbers-wise, but certainly a productive season. There are plenty of teams out there, including the Bears, with a boatload of cap space who will unquestionably be giving him a call as soon as free agency starts. I'd be shocked if the Packers are able to hold on to him. Now, maybe they tell him, look, if you don't like what you see out there in free agency, come on back and let's work out something, albeit a team-friendly deal for Lazard. But, yeah, I'd be very, very surprised if he's back. As far as Big Dog goes, I think it's a foregone conclusion that he's back if Aaron is back. If Aaron isn't back, I'm not automatically saying that Big Dog is gone, but I think it's a lot more likely. But that said, the man can still move people, move humans in a way that few others can, especially at that position. You can use him in line and he can surprise you with his receiving ability from time to time. I wouldn't completely write him off if Jordan Love is the starter, but I would say most likely he's probably gone. That's just guesswork on my part, obviously. Ryan, thanks for the super chat. I think one of the reasons Matt LaFleur didn't appear on Packer Transplants is that he didn't want to answer tough questions about the Packers' play. I don't think that's it. We didn't ask him until the bye week because that's what we had done every other offseason or every other season. He'd appeared during the bye. And this year, it was the first year that there weren't any like NFL mandated pandemic rules in place. So he and his family got out of town. So, I can't begrudge the guy for not coming on, although I will say could have come on at any point after that. But, I get it. Like, I don't think it had anything to do with being afraid to answer tough questions. I certainly don't think that was the case. I mean, if you ask the internet, all I ask is softballs anyway. Abdul, thanks for the super chat. Saw another tweet about Packers and Waller. What's the reason behind this consistent interest? I hope we don't. Had him in fantasy, he's always hurt. Yeah, the injury issue is a concern. There's no doubt, but I think the interest is obvious. I mean, the guy is a baller when he's on the field. He is a difference maker. I mean, you talk about a special player and a guy who can tilt a field when he's right. Waller's definitely it, and I understand that fascination. But to your point, yeah, it's been tough keeping him on the field. I'm interested to see if Brian continues to try and acquire him. Kind of reminds me of what he did with Snacks a couple years ago. Remember, like the Twitter kind of drumbeat. We all wanted Snacks, and Brian was clearly interested, but kept missing him. And then he got released by Seattle and finally signed him. And then they barely played him for the 6 games he was in uniform, whatever. And he pretty much got maybe not benched, but barely utilized while he was in town. But that was a player that Brian clearly coveted and wanted to get in the building and finally did. So who knows? Maybe there's something similar about Waller, that he just absolutely loves the skill set, thinks that he could add something to the offense, which I think he could. But he's certainly been trying for a while now. There's no doubt about that. Del Eros, thanks to Super Chat. Matt's first choice 2 years ago, Jim Leonard, is still out there. You've seen what Barry can do, and it isn't enough. It's show business, not friends. Yeah, but that's okay. That's my saying. I always say it, which of course I lifted from Jerry Maguire. But that these guys think on a different level. Like Matt is thinking big picture as far as he's seen that promise that I talked about at the beginning of the stream, right? The idea that we've seen them do it. They just need to do it more consistently. And his thinking clearly is that we need to continue to grow within and develop from within. It's very Ted Thompson-esque, actually. The idea being Joe is going to improve from year to year with this squad. Now, we certainly didn't see that improvement, at least not as much as we had hoped, from last year to this year. But Matt's thinking, obviously, is from this 2022 season to 23, we are going to see a significant jump in consistency, if nothing else. And Jim Leonard, yeah, okay, great. Jim Leonard is out there. I mean, you want to run Mike Pettine's system again? I'm fine, man. Juan, thanks for the super chat. Is LaFleur and Rodgers' relationship coming to an end? I mean, the professional relationship might, as far as whatever Aaron decides to do, if he's coming back or if he wants to be traded or what have you. But I think their personal relationship is just fine. I think there's, every possibility that the professional side of things is winding down, but I think there's a great deal of respect between both of those guys. And I think Aaron is not blind to what Matt has meant to his career, especially winning those 2 MVPs. There's a reason he called Matt out from the stage at the honors last year when he won that second MVP, telling him, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of, you're a big part of this. He knows how important Matt's been. So, I think the 2 guys are fine, but the professional relationship, good possibility to be winding down. John, thanks for the super chat. Why do some coordinators, Bieniemy, struggle to get a shot at head coach while other retreads continually get chances? It's truly mind-boggling, in my opinion. Yeah, the Bieniemy thing is interesting because clearly the man knows football. You got the notes right after the Super Bowl about how his tape study and something he showed in practice as regards to a tendency in the red zone that the Eagles clearly struggled with. Reed and the Chiefs took advantage of that, scored 2 touchdowns with it. Guy clearly knows ball. So you have to think this is purely about how he interviews in the room. And when I say how he interviews, it's, I would think, most likely more about how other people, i.e., NFL owners, are perceiving him and not being comfortable with whatever personality he's exhibiting in these interviews. It kind of reminds me, and it's not similar in the sense of their personalities because they're very different. But remember, Mike Zimmer took forever to get a head coaching job because he's so gruff and he was so kind of like matter of fact, and he really put people off in the interview process until the Wilfs obviously gave him a head coaching gig in Minnesota. I'm not saying that like he's putting people off in the interview, but there's a possibility that these NFL owners are just not clicking with him for whatever reason, and they're not able to see past that. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, you should be able to see past it with the resume that he has, with everything that he's done. Give this man your head coaching job because he's clearly a winner and a guy who knows how to design an offense and has designed some of the best, highest scoring, greatest, most potent offensive attacks this league has ever seen. He's had a hand in many of them. He's helped bring along Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes swears blind by the guy. Like, give this guy, like, whatever personality issue you may have or whatever issue you may have in the interview room, you gotta, as an NFL owner, be able to look past that. And clearly, so far, no NFL owner has been able to, which is really unfortunate. And I see all this shit about like, oh, he's got to go maybe call plays someplace. Who else had to do this? Who else had to go to another gig and prove they could call NFL or call plays in an NFL level? You know, that were working under Andy Reid. How many dudes under Andy have gone on to get gigs? Matt Nagy, ring any bells? I mean, come on. That is such horse manure. And I'm obviously not upset at you. It's just like, it's so clear that NFL owners are not able to look past whatever is being said and happening in the interview process and in the interview room. It's going to take some owner who's able to look past that and go, oh, look at this guy's resume and look at the job he does as a coach, as a motivator, as a play designer. Like, yes, he should be a head coach. Juan, thanks for the super chat. Newer cheesehead here, about 15 years. How does the current Packers leadership compare to years past? Have we always been so reactive and passive? Ooh, Juan, that's a really good question. So reactive and passive. I think 1265 Lombardi would tell you that they are not reactive and passive, but they are steady. And there's a difference, clearly. You've got the kind of stuff out there this Sunday about where the Packers stand in regards to Rodgers. I know most Packers fans, as someone earlier was saying, would take the reins and, drive the ship, so to speak, and tell Aaron what's what. The Packers prefer a very steady approach. They're not going to make waves. They're not going to usually what the word would be too aggressive with things. But I will say, it took Ted Thompson and his steady hand to make some tough decisions at times in the past. I think we've certainly seen Mark Murphy possibly err on the side of caution once too often, whether it, was letting Ted stick around in his duties probably a year, maybe even too long before ultimately needing to turn that page. Probably should have been done a little bit earlier. But for the most part, I think they're steady. And I think there's something to be said for that in the league's smallest market, where flush days, Titletown's booming, they're great, Lambeau Field's packed, it's wonderful. But never forget, then the pandemic kind of threw this into sharp relief a couple years ago. They are a couple bad downturn years away from being maybe not in trouble, but in for a tough time. They talk about the reserve fund. If for whatever reason, let's say revenue sharing went away, and there are still NFL owners who would love to do away with revenue sharing. Revenue sharing goes away. You see the Packers and all these lists financially when it comes to the league, they're in top 10 or in the middle of the pack. They would drop down so fast. They would sink like a stone. And I'm not saying they would dissolve. I'm not saying they would just like cease to exist, but it would become a major struggle. It would become a lot more like the Premier League, where the Packers would be at the bottom of the table. No question about it. And yes, Titletown, that's their money. They get to keep it. That's the whole reason they have it. Like, that would help keep them competitive. But man, the difference is if, say, revenue sharing went away and you looked at the Dallases of the world or the Washingtons of the world, it'd be real tough for them to compete. And all of this is to say, I know I'm taking a very 30,000-foot view here, but to this question, but that is what the Packers are built on. They are cautious because they have to make sure that they're always viable, always looking ahead the next 5, even 10 years to make sure that they're going to be okay. And because of that, they are a little steadier. They are a little calmer. They want to take, a deep breath before they make a decision, both literally and figuratively. So, yeah, no, I think the modern landscape of the NFL has led them to this, what you're talking about, Juan. I will say, on the football side of things, they've kind of been like this for a bit longer than what you're talking about, 15 years. I think it goes back to Ron Wolf being a little bit more aggressive as far as football decisions go. And then Bob Harlan taking a big swing, and then realizing that, he's made a mistake with John Jones and blah, 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 all that. That's Packers history. So there was more volatile moments, definitely. But the last 20 plus years, yeah, it's been pretty steady. And I think that's a very good thing for the smallest market in the league. Deshaun Perry, thanks for the super chat. Haven't checked in a while on Rodgers' watch. Based on the reporter, does it seem like 12 is coming back or not? I'll tell you what, all the vibe around the internet is that he's getting traded away, but I'm still not buying it. I'll believe it when I see it, is where I'm standing. I think he's back for one more year. And then they'll have the uncomfortable conversation with Jordan Love, which will undoubtedly lead to him asking for a trade, and the Packers saying, just like we told Aaron 2 years ago, we're not trading you, and then they'll play out 2023. That's my guess right now, sitting here post-Super Bowl. Vex, thanks to the super chat. You think the Packers will watch the Super Bowl and see tight ends are valuable in the current NFL? Nah. I mean, yeah, of course they know they're valuable. It's just a question of what resources you want to utilize to acquire one. I still see people mocking a tight end to the Packers at 15, and I can't believe it. Maybe they took an off-ball linebacker last year, so that surprised me. So you never know, but it's how the board falls and what you want to utilize those assets for. The Packers traditionally want to utilize, most likely, more often than not, especially early premium picks. They want to go, either defensive line, corner, maybe offensive tackle. There are premium positions in their eyes. Abdul, thanks again. Do you think Murphy steps down before mandatory age of retirement? No, I do not. What is he, like 2 years away? Something like that? 2 or 3? So no. Yeah, I think he'll stick out these final years. Vex, Mark Murphy has done incredibly for financial stability. I very much agree. I mean, you can quibble and get upset and all the stuff about the Favre stuff and the Rodgers stuff, and I get that. But Mark Murphy has done a pretty damn good job as a steward of the Green Bay Packers as far as the development of Titletown, the roots that the Packers organization has within the community and the state, and even like looking out for the Packers and keeping the international stuff at bay for as long as possible to ensure that those games are all played at Lambeau prior to this season where they are mandated to play across the pond. I think that's a job really well done. And that wasn't like a given. He didn't need to do that. He could have told, basically Packer shareholders or the board or the executive committee, look, we've got to do this. We've got to go play internationally. The league wants us to, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't. He understood how important those home games were. He understood the fabric of the franchise and the fan base and how much it meant to have all those games in Lambeau. So I think, in that regard, he's done a very, very good job shepherding the Packers, so to speak, during his tenure. I'm excited to see what's next. No doubt about it, but I think he's done a really, really good job. We found love in a hopeless place. Oh, here we go, John. Here we go. The love puns. It is Valentine's Day after all, so we need all the love titles. Oh, let's see. I make sure I didn't miss any super chats, which I think I did. Here we go. Abdul, do you think Rodgers would have won more Super Bowls if he had bought in with McCarthy and Matt LaFleur and didn't think he knew better, or is that simplifying it? Wow. Simplifying a little bit, I think. I don't think you can blame Rodgers for a lack of more rings on his hand. I really don't. I think he did get stuck in a spot where everybody's kind of a victim of their circumstance, right? And the fact that he's always going to be compared as a disappointment to Brady winning all these rings. Rodgers, at the height of his powers, was a much more talented quarterback than Tom Brady, but Tom was a much more effective quarterback consistently throughout the years, right? Rodgers' highs were higher, but there was lows and highs and dips and valleys. I think with Rodgers, being paired with Mike McCarthy, their offense was fire, man, for 4, 5, 6 years even, and then, yes, it got stale. Aaron probably started taking over, as Ryan Grant so perfectly put it, is like artificial intelligence. He soaked up all the knowledge that he could until he realized he knew it all and didn't need Mike anymore, essentially. All that time, while Rodgers was becoming this AI version, they had Dom Capers as their defensive coordinator. Packers fans on the internet will remember the fire Dom Capers every single year at the end of the season because of some blown lead and or demolishing in the playoffs. But I also understood Mike McCarthy sticking by Dom Capers because he was working with a general manager who really didn't take big swings in free agency and really didn't utilize free agency much at all. And instead, when injuries happened and they struck like they do every single season, instead of going out and making big trades or finding free agents, even mid-level free agents, they would instead turn to their practice squad and bring up guys who have very little experience. And so that's why you've got Ladarius Gunter trying to cover Julio Jones in the biggest game of the year in the NFC Championship game. So you look at it through that lens, and I understand McCarthy's frustration and why sound football was on display for much of Capers' tenure until you got to these big games where oftentimes they were just outmanned. And they ran this scheme that was really tough on these young guys. So there's all these kind of levels to it, right? So I don't think, Rodgers buying in with McCarthy or LaFleur changes much of that. Yes, he could have performed better in that 2020 NFC Championship game, but he didn't give up a touchdown to Scotty fucking Miller at the end of the first half. He didn't drop an interception the play before that touchdown to Scotty Miller. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard. It's hard for me to bash Rodgers on that one. Joe, what's up, man? Thanks for super chat. Bears drafted Trubisky when they could have drafted Mahomes. Packers hired Ray Rhodes as head coach when they had Andy Reid on staff. Which was worse? Oh, it's definitely trading up for Trubisky. Come on now. I mean, look, would have loved to have Andy Reid as a coach in Green Bay. No question about it. But I'm also very, very happy they went down the road they did with Mike and now with Matt. The Ray Rhodes thing didn't work out, but I understand why Ron wanted to do it. He wanted a guy with NFL head coaching experience. And don't forget, Ray had won NFL Coach of the Year in Philadelphia. It's not like he was regarded as some bum. So, I mean, Andy, God bless him, he's gone on to do great things. There's no question about it. But it's hard to see them turning the page from Mike to Andy when they did. George, thanks to the super chat. That A.J. Brown tweet was wild. TikTok boy, that was amazing. For those of you who maybe aren't on Twitter or didn't see it yet, Juju Smith-Schuster put out a tweet mocking the Bradbury, the corner who grabbed him, with a Valentine's picture with his headshot saying, "I'll hold you at the most important time," or whatever. And then A.J. Brown retweeted it and basically annihilated Juju Smith-Schuster. I won't say the whole thing here, but it's very well done. That's a guy who clearly has his teammates back. You love to see it. Ed, thanks to Super Chat. Thoughts on coaches who may be outstanding offensive or defensive coaches, but not good at head coaching? It happens. I think we were talking about Mike Zimmer before. I think Mike Zimmer is a perfect example of that. He's one of the best D coordinators you're ever going to find on this planet. Not so sure he's a great head coach. And I think Minnesota Vikings fans would probably agree. But yeah, it happens. It's really, really hard to tell who that might be in the interview process. And it's really difficult to get a handle on it until you see him actually do the job. So it's understandable why sometimes those guys get the gig and then show, oh yeah, he's a coordinator, not a head coach. It's a tough thing to gauge there in the interview process, in the interview room. Who's going to connect, who's going to be able to push those buttons. That's one of the things that I really appreciated about Matt. And something that I think we talked about his first year as a coach. It's not a thing you can find out in an interview process. You got to watch him do it, but his ability to press the right buttons and know when guys as a team, as a collective, need to be pushed or when to step back and let them take the lead. I think he's done a really good job of that. And that's something you can't, again, really figure out in an interview process. You just kind of trust your gut and you find out who's who in that regard. All right, buddy, I'm going to have to get going. I can't thank you enough for hanging out, talking Packers each and every day, Monday through Friday, right here on the Cheesehead TV social channels. Please do me a monster favor. Hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and then tell your friends, tell your family, Cheesehead TV. We are devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great night. Go Pack Go.